It begins with someone saying that reincarnation is like spinning a roulette wheel. You could end up reborn as an animal or even as a cockroach scuttling on the ground. So, if you're lucky enough to be reborn as a human again, it's like you've essentially beaten the odds. But to cut to the chase, our protagonist was indeed lucky enough to survive the game of chance, and the spinning roulette chose him to be human again. However, it's said that in his previous life, he literally worked himself to death, and it seemed things were promising for him so far. But the body he was reincarnated into belonged to an extra in a dark, depressing novel he used to enjoy. The character is a one-time villain who gets killed off in the first chapter. The hopeless troublemaker Han Siha. As he reflects on this with a disappointed look, the panel reveals that Han Siha is a talented but lazy young man interested in black magic, which eventually leads to his tragic end when he discovers that it's taboo. He also has a petty personality, unable to overcome his greed, and eventually dies as an extra character. Additionally, his abilities seem unpromising, so there's no need to dwell on that. Instead, let's focus on the real situation of our protagonist, who now finds himself in a problematic position, cursing the spinning wheel for making him possess someone like that, demanding that if he had free will to choose, he would at least pick someone promising like a hero or someone handsome. Kidding aside, our protagonist was worried that this situation would bring him trouble. He lamented that possessing a one-time villain was bad enough, but doing so in such a dire situation made it even worse. The current setting was an auxiliary facility for dark mages, and Han Siha, who once had high expectations due to his natural magical potential, had been briefly acknowledged, but ended up being ostracized at the academy because of his lack of real-world skills. It seems that Han Siha had come here to join the dark magic organization. Now, as he stood there, these mysterious people were facing him, but they seemed to be ignoring him. One of them asked who he might be, and another responded that it was just a kid begging to join their organization. They also mentioned that the boy was a student at Ardwell Academy. This gave one of the men a bold idea. He looked at the boy with an evil glint in his eye, saying that if he was a student of Ardwell Academy, he might be useful to them. He then told him to come and follow them. Hearing this, our protagonist began to panic, sweating as he debated whether to follow or not. However, he had no choice. He couldn't defeat them, so he agreed and followed them. As they walked, one of the men asked him if he knew the procedure for joining. Our protagonist replied that of course he did, all the while thinking that once he drew the blood of a member and swore an oath to dark magic, he could never leave the place. How could he not know about it? He also remembered that the dark mage organization Han Siha, or rather, he, since he now possessed Han Siha, was about to join was a cliched evil force that would ultimately be destroyed by the protagonist of the novel he had read. That if he went through with the dark mage contract, he would be killed by the protagonist too. So, he thought, instead of following those guys, he needed to figure out how to escape from this death trap right away. As he was worrying, he suddenly stopped for a moment because a notification appeared, a system prompt synchronizing with Han Siha's perspective. As the synchronization loaded and finally completed, the system warned him to escape. Our protagonist was shocked by the sudden appearance of what seemed like a cheat code out of nowhere. It appeared his luck was still strong. But as he saw the warning on the screen, he was stunned for a moment. At that time, a loud voice echoed through the area, like the creepy scream of someone being tortured. This made him even more nervous. One of the men asked his companion about the sound they had heard, wondering if something had happened in the basement. As the man started to go check what was happening, he turned to our protagonist and threatened him, saying that if he tried to flee, he would be dead for sure. He advised him not to move from his spot if he valued his life. Our protagonist replied that he understood. So, without further ado, those guys rushed off to check what was happening, leaving our protagonist behind. Taking advantage of the timing, he realized he had a chance to escape. Once he was sure they were gone, he started to run, holding his breath. He kept running, but he had no idea where the exit was. Exhausted, he stopped for a moment to think, muttering to himself that he was running around like a lunatic without knowing where the exit was. As he paused, he noticed a locked door in front of him and saw some light getting closer, making him wonder if it was the right direction. But this was just speculation on his part. So, before he could act, a sudden voice startled him. It seemed that a member of the dark magic group was passing by, so he rushed to hide. As he listened, two men were talking about a kid who had escaped from their third basement floor. It became clear they were referring to him. Hearing this, he felt a surge of panic, worried that if they found him, he would be dead for sure. As the two men walked away, they also mentioned that the boy was a student of Adele Academy, and they suspected he was a spy. Once they were far enough away, he checked his surroundings to ensure it was safe. After making sure no one else was nearby, he rushed to open the door in front of him, but it was locked. He tried desperately to force it open, even though he knew it wouldn't work. In the end, he failed and felt hopeless as he couldn't budge the door at all. Desperate, he thought of a solution, realizing that in his situation, the only thing he could rely on was his memory. Even though Han Siha was worthless, he had to think of something. He cursed under his breath as he considered his options, and saying that Han Siha had no talent for white magic, but he was born with magic power within his body. However, with such an uncontrollable amount of magic power, he couldn't even figure out which goalpost he was aiming for. In other words, he just needed to control his magic power and concentrate. Focusing intently, he managed to direct the magic power flow into his fingertips. He placed his hand on the lock in front of him and released all of it, hoping to open the door. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and he felt even more exhausted than from running. As he caught his breath, he muttered that his skill was not good enough yet, and that he had a long way to go. Suddenly, he sensed a figure in the dark behind him. It seemed to be a beast moving towards him, each step exuding a domineering aura. Its eyes glowed as it stared at him. Realizing that something was approaching, our protagonist turned around, thinking that this was the end. But to his surprise, he saw a beast, specifically a little dragon, roaring at him. Instead of being scared, he was amazed to see a cute little dragon roaring in an adorably high-pitched tone. The dragon approached him and grabbed his robe, indicating that it wanted to be picked up. Perplexed, our protagonist picked up the dragon, wondering why such a creature had made its way to this place and why it was so friendly towards him. Pondering this, he told the dragon coldly and directly that he couldn't take it with him, explaining that it was hard enough to manage himself. After all, would he really be able to care for it? However, upon hearing this, the little dragon was shocked and couldn't believe it. So, the little dragon started acting out and crying like an innocent baby. But our protagonist, with a cold-hearted resolve, tried to quiet it down. However, the cute little dragon was not so easily silenced and continued making noise. With no other choice, our protagonist reluctantly decided to let it be and took it along with him. As he ran, feeling frustrated, he muttered that the little dragon was doing it on purpose. In his mind, he knew he couldn't adopt something he couldn't be responsible for. But then, he suddenly stopped and realized that, since it had come to this, maybe he should try using the dragon's power. As he looked at the dragon, thinking about this, his system suddenly popped up, informing him that his taming ability had been unlocked and asking if he wished to tame the little dragon. The system identified the creature as a suspicious hatchling and displayed its abilities. It was a level 2 with a magic power of 50, along with strength, agility, and intelligence stats. It also had a flamethrower skill at level 1. Seeing this, our protagonist was surprised and somewhat confused. What frustrated him even more was that there was no accept button on the system. He realized he would need to tame the dragon hands-on. He thought to himself, "Boy, don't push your luck too far." Anyway, as he realized it, he remarked that when it comes to taming, he actually has quite a bit of experience and talent. He boasted about his technique, using a few gestures to offer reassurance and build trust. He then told the little dragon to trust him, looking at it with a serious expression. However, deep inside, he worried whether he was doing it correctly. Thankfully, the little dragon seemed to accept him as its contractor, floating into the air and releasing a glowing light, indicating that the taming was successful. As the dragon descended, our protagonist wondered if he had truly succeeded in taming it, though he expected there might be more to it. Cutting off his thoughts, he decided to check for himself and commanded his new pet, addressing it as Reptile, to complete its first task, breaking the lock on the door. The cute reptile moved forward, its eyes glowing, then jumped and bit the chain lock, breaking it instantly. Our protagonist was shocked, not expecting it to break so easily. With the lock broken, it seemed they could now escape. He praised the dragon, saying it did a good job, feeling happy that they might make it out alive. But suddenly, footsteps approached, giving him a bad feeling. As he looked back, the men spotted him and sneered, calling him a rat and saying that if they caught him, they would roast him alive. Panicking after being discovered, our protagonist found himself paralyzed with fear, wondering what he should do. Forcing himself to think, he realized the men were getting closer. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. He remembered a spell called Smog, the first self-defense spell taught at the academy. It was a basic spell that created smoke for concealment, and it was so simple that even someone with no magical talent could learn it. Although he knew the spell, he had never actually used it before. But in this situation, he had no choice but to try. Without further delay, he steadied his breath and focused his energy on his fingertips, imagining he was holding a gun. To his relief, it worked. As a light started to form at his fingertips, the men stopped in their tracks. Our protagonist quickly cast the spell, creating a cloud of smoke around them. Amazed and happy that his spell had worked, he used the distraction to flee and approached the door. Just as he started to open it, a sudden spirit hand appeared, grabbing him by the neck. He was shocked, unable to breathe as the hand choked him, and he collapsed to the ground. His cute reptile companion rushed to his side, while he wondered if this was the end. The man who cast the demonic spell sneered, saying that the boy couldn't escape as he pleased, and that at least his death would be painless, so he should be grateful for not feeling any pain. But the man was sweating and seemed worried about something. His companion was nowhere to be seen, and it appeared that the spell he cast had consumed a large amount of his mana. As our protagonist lay there, feeling hopeless, he realized just how dire his situation had become. As he thought about how unfair it was to be reborn only to die again, he desperately tried to think of a way to break free from the spell, even as he struggled to breathe. Just when things seemed hopeless, he remembered he had one more card to play, his pet reptile. The little dragon, sensing his distress, clung to his robe, worried. Our protagonist, struggling for breath, told the dragon that if it really wanted to get out of there, it needed to listen to him. Apologizing for controlling it with his lousy skills, he looked into the dragon's eyes with determination and asked if it could lend him a hand. The cute reptile opened its wings and approached the spellcaster with a domineering aura, releasing a powerful flamethrower. The flames enveloped the man, who screamed in pain and confusion, shocked by the sudden appearance of such a powerful beast. He hadn't expected that our boy would have such a formidable companion. Meanwhile, the spirit hand around our protagonist's neck vanished, freeing him. As he caught his breath, the little dragon watched the man burn, ensuring the threat was eliminated. Once the danger had passed, the dragon returned to our protagonist, roaring as if to ask if he was okay. Our protagonist didn't quite expect things to turn out this way, but he was grateful to have a trustworthy pet to rely on. Smiling, he was surprised when the cute reptile jumped on him, and the two shared a comforting moment. It felt refreshing. As they enjoyed the brief respite, our protagonist told the little dragon that he owed it his life and promised to take care of it. But first, they needed to get out of there. The scene shifted to an hour later. They were now venturing through a desert, seeking refuge in a cave. As they walked, putting distance between themselves and the dark mages, our protagonist began to feel a bit relieved. However, the heat of the sun was exhausting, and he became increasingly thirsty. The little reptile was also worn out and thirsty, He vowed to himself that he would never allow himself to be caught by those dark mages again, knowing it would surely mean death. Not far away, he spotted a carriage and approached it, asking the old driver if they could possibly get a ride. The old man asked if he had money to pay for the ride. Without hesitation, our protagonist checked his robe pocket and found a gold card. Showing it to the old man, he asked if it would be enough to get them a ride. The old man was shocked upon seeing the card, recognizing it as one provided by Adele Academy, a card that conferred certain privileges. After reconsidering, the old man eventually agreed to let them in. Grateful, they thanked him and took their seats in the carriage. As they settled in, the old man asked where they were headed. Our protagonist hesitated, realizing that he had rushed out without a plan. But knowing that the dark mages might soon be on his trail, and that they would kill him to prevent any information from leaking, he had no choice but to go to the one place where people might still want him dead. It was also the safest place he could think of to hide, for the time being. Adele Academy, as mentioned in the novel he had read. So, our boy's new journey began. At Adele Academy, a girl rushed to enter the building. She was Selene, a second-year assistant professor, who was impressed by the Academy's luxurious marble floors and elegant chandeliers. She remarked on how even the students' uniforms exuded an air of refinement. As she waved to the students, her gaze suddenly faltered when she saw a ghostly figure. The sight was startling, as our boy emerged from an old and dusty carriage. Surrounded by dust, he stepped out with a dusty robe and weary expression. Selene couldn't believe her eyes and nearly collapsed, horrified at the sight of someone so unkempt entering their pristine academy. She wondered how a student like him had ended up there, and looked down at him with disdain. Our boy, now feeling refreshed by the fresh air, was oblivious to the professor's reaction. Selene was concerned that this boy, Han Siha, might tarnish the academy's reputation on the very first day of the semester. She recalled that Han Siha was someone who had nearly failed due to his inability to control his innate magical talent. Meanwhile, our boy kept his cute reptile hidden inside his robe, though the dragon was restless and demanded to be freed. Noticing the frantic professor, our boy checked her out and deduced that she must be a professor, given her appearance and behavior. That's why he approached her and asked if he was late. She confirmed that he was. As she looked him up and down, she dismissed him, saying he was not worthy of such attention. She added that she didn't have time to worry about a failure with no potential, and suggested he wasn't worth her bother. She recalled the rumors about him being creepy, with an interest in black magic, and the stories about him being a lunatic who hugged a voodoo doll every night. She believed that getting involved with him would bring nothing but trouble. Tapping his shoulder, she urged him to hurry inside. Our boy thanked her appreciatively, showing a soft, bright smile. The positive vibe he gave off left her stunned and shocked. As she observed him entering, she noted that, as a second-year professor, her perspective had changed. She watched him thoughtfully as he went inside. Now, inside the room, our boy seemed to attract attention from his classmates, who murmured and gossiped about him. They labeled him as creepy and discussed his recent entrance, noting that he arrived by carriage and appeared poor. They looked down on him and criticized his behavior. Our boy ignored the chatter, staying calm and reflecting that he was likely doomed to be a minor, crazed villain character. Sitting alone in the back, he overheard his classmates speculating that he must have advanced due to some sort of favor from a professor. He wondered if his family had bribed someone for his advancement, if a professor had recognized his potential, or if a magic tower had written him a recommendation. He decided that for now, his priority was to figure out how to survive in this dark fantasy novel using his own strength. He broke down his survival goals into two main objectives. First, he needed to survive in a quiet place. But since he hadn't found that yet, he didn't need to worry about it immediately. As a third-rate villain known for being violent and incompetent, he faced the risk of a gruesome end, being buried alive by the protagonist. Concerned, he noted that the Academy's closure for the year meant he had some time, though the exact reason for his character's death was still unclear. It could be due to unresolved loose ends or other crimes he was unaware of. Determined to avoid a similar fate, he resolved to live quietly and cautiously. He preferred to die working hard, rather than being buried alive. His second plan was to graduate safely. By adapting and making a life in this new world, he aimed to secure his future. Though his family was wealthy, they had disowned him due to his past behavior. Therefore, obtaining his diploma would be a reliable way to ensure a stable future and make a living. He decided that instead of getting involved with the protagonist and risking his own demise, he would rather live quietly as an ordinary student. He resolved to do his best to block every scenario that could lead to his end. When their professor arrived, everyone greeted him. The students murmured about the intense aura the professor exuded. Our boy recognized him as Professor Grint from the magic department. While he was relaxing, his classmates expressed concern that their exams this semester would be difficult, commenting on how intimidating the professor was. Professor Grint silenced them, acknowledging that the students who advanced to the second year were quite impressive. He mentioned that he had noticed some students who stood out. Our boy agreed, noting that the presence of promising students, including the protagonist, raised the overall quality of the academy. He remarked that this made the conditions quite unfavorable for him, as the rules felt like a Jeopardy game. He noted that Adele Academy accepted students aged 14 to 19 and was known for its rigorous curriculum. Thanks to its promising students winning competitions, the academy had become more like a competitive arena. However, only about 10% of students managed to graduate with high honors, which he found daunting. Given the intense competition, he wondered how he could possibly compete with the protagonist. He remembered that, in the original plot, the protagonist rapidly grew his power within the black magic organization. Since he planned to live quietly, this seemed nearly impossible. At that moment, Professor Grint announced that many students did not meet the required standards, and those lacking skills would not be allowed to join his class. Our boy was shocked, feeling as if he had received a harsh blow, and the professor seemed to be referring to him with a serious look, as if scrutinizing him. After announcing the opening exam schedule, he tapped the ground with his walking stick, causing a display announcement illusion to appear before them. Our boy was stunned, his expression reflecting amazement. He remarked that the spell was unbelievable, noting the sophisticated level of the illusion. The display showed that based on his experience over the past year, he needed to freely choose 3 subjects and take both written and practical exams for those subjects. He was impressed by the top-notch magic used by the academy, but realized that being able to choose the exam subjects freely could be advantageous. However, he suspected that it wouldn't be that easy, and wondered if there might be a twist. The professor announced that he would personally draw the balls containing the students' names from a box to determine the order. Our boy thought to himself that relying on luck for the exam was unfortunate, feeling as if fate was playing a joke on him. Given his current lack of knowledge about magic, his only option was to pick subjects early to manage his grades. He felt that his luck had already been used up escaping the dark magicians and wondered what to do next. Meanwhile, the professor drew a ball from the box and announced that the first person to choose their subjects would be Han Siha. Our boy was surprised and somewhat relieved to have the first pick, feeling that his luck hadn't completely run out. He began to look at the available subjects and realized that, since he was not very familiar with magic, he needed to avoid practical-oriented subjects and anything related to necromancy, as mentioned in the story. However, as he reviewed the subjects, he found that all of them seemed difficult and struggled to choose a suitable one. Finally, he found one subject that seemed manageable: exploration of arithmetic and magic formulas. Though he initially thought the name sounded incredibly difficult, he decided it was the easiest option available. He also considered that he was good at memorization, so he could manage it somehow. His peers discussed his choice, noting that the arithmetic subject was the easiest among the options, and they were relieved that he picked it, as they were struggling with it. As the conversation continued, our boy quickly chose his remaining 2 subjects. He noticed that one of them seemed doable. The scene shifted to the library, where he was studying quietly. He reflected that, before coming to this world, he had worked as an intern veterinarian, and the subjects he chose were somewhat similar to his major in veterinary science. He decided to focus first on exploration of arithmetic and magic formulas, acknowledging that while the arithmetic methods were unique to this world, he might not be able to apply his known math formulas effectively. After finishing his studies, he moved on to a book called Monster Anatomy, an introduction to basic taming and behavioral science. While focusing on his studies, he forgot about his pet inside his bag. Other students passing by grew suspicious and curious about the moving bag. It became a bit troublesome for him to ignore, especially since his cute reptile wanted to come out. He pushed the reptile back into the bag to prevent it from drawing attention due to its appearance. Although his pet wanted to come out and play, our boy decided to keep it hidden to avoid causing a scene. He thought that bringing his pet might be useful, but it only created more trouble. With too many eyes around, he had no choice but to leave the library. He realized that, as Han Siha, who struggled with magic control, taming a dragon hatchling could cause suspicion and attract unwanted attention. He promised himself to be more cautious in the future. After leaving the library, he went to the underground training area of the academy. There, he told his cute reptile that it could run freely and behave like a wild beast, as the area was a safe place for it. He thought that since he had managed to grasp the theory to some extent, it would be a good opportunity to practice his taming skills. Now, he was asking the staff member managing the training ground for an entry ticket to the beginner practice area. She seemed surprised and looked at his cute reptile, remarking that it was a hatchling. She expressed her amazement that the boy would bring a dragon to the beginner area. As she asked for the name, our boy realized with shock that he hadn't named his pet yet. He asked the reptile what its name was. The cute reptile, scratching its head in confusion, eventually said, "Chime," with a happy reaction. Our boy saw this as a sign to choose a name for his pet, and the reptile seemed to agree. While he was thinking about it, the cute reptile became frustrated with him for not understanding. As he continued to ponder, he suggested names like Drake, Carcharodontosaurus, and even Charizard, thinking they were the coolest names he could come up with. However, the cute reptile, with an intense aura, indicated that if he didn't choose a good name, he would roast him. Seeing this, our boy decided to carefully select a unique and fitting name, ultimately choosing Basilisk. Our boy noticed that the cute reptile liked the name Basilisk, as it brightened up at the sound of it. The girl then registered the name and informed him that the training area could accommodate up to 2 people, mentioning that there was currently 1 person in the other room. After this, she guided them to the weaponry room, explaining that it was a rental service available for students like them. Our boy noted that the weapons there seemed pretty crappy, possibly because they were free. He decided not to be picky, as he wanted to get stronger and should be grateful for whatever he received. He selected a shield and a wand stick. Once prepared, the girl led them to the gate of the beginner practice area. As she opened it, our boy felt a mix of worry, astonishment, and excitement. Inside, he was amazed to find that the place resembled a beautiful garden. As they explored, he spotted a slime and commented that even low-level monsters seemed somewhat kind-hearted. However, he wasn't feeling particularly kind himself. He asked Basil if he saw the slimes, and upon receiving confirmation, he declared that he intended to blow them up. Basil, stunned and shocked by his cold-hearted master's intention, shook in disbelief. But he had no choice. So our cute Basil went there and annihilated those block slimes. While our boy watched Basil, noting that Basil's actions were colder than he had anticipated, and he remarked that the bastard seemed to enjoy playing with those monsters. It appeared that Basil's dragon instincts were awakening, which, given his genes, was natural. He cursed Basil, noting that the one who had been scared earlier was nowhere to be seen now. While Basil was eating them all while he walked around the area, observing that Basil seemed fine, he decided he should practice and improve his skills and abilities too. As he ventured around, he heard the noisy echoes of beasts and suddenly felt an attack. He quickly turned around stunned but thankfully able to react in time and defend himself. It seemed the block slime monsters were seeking revenge, a quick result of his karma. He saw them in groups and realized he couldn't defeat all of them due to his lack of strength. However, with Basil and his strategy, he could annihilate them one by one. At the right moment, Basil finished with the block slimes and came to him. Our boy asked Basil if he had stretched enough, then told him his plan. They needed to try what they had done before. Our cute Basil, responding to the command, attacked and used his flamethrower on the monsters. A powerful burst of destructive force emerged, and the monsters disappeared like dust. It seemed our cute Basil had become even more powerful than before. Because of it, our boy was shocked and hadn't expected his cute Basil to become more powerful. He praised Basil, calling it a promising and excellent job, and said they must keep going, improving their skills, and practicing like crazy. Half a day passed, and they were lying on the ground, exhausted. He remarked that while practicing his magic, he kept switching between taming Basil and casting offensive spells, and now really felt like he might die. Observing his pet, he noticed that Basil was listening to him well. He vowed that when they returned to the dorm, he would feed Basil delicious food. As he said this, our cute Basil was sleeping nearby. Our boy noticed something fighting below and went to check it out. They saw that it was one of the students mentioned by the girl before, who had been training there first. It appeared that his beast was playing around, scooping up mud, while the girl, kneeling in despair, was frustrated because her beast wasn't listening to her. Her face showed anger that seemed ready to explode at any moment. After that, the girl calmed herself and stood there, trying again to command the beast. She did her best, but it seemed the creature was not comfortable with her. It remained cautious and barked at her. Meanwhile, our boy watched her attempt to tame the hellhound. He commented that her approach to handling his beast was wrong, saying she shouldn't treat it that way. As the girl knelt and shouted for the beast to come back and sit down, it ignored her and ran off. Frustrated, she searched for her unruly pet, complaining that the bastard wasn't listening to her. She angrily swore that if she caught it, it would regret it. While she continued her search, she noticed something surprising. Her troublesome beast had become gentle and was now obediently sitting with our boy. As she approached them with a determined stride, she wondered how the second-year student, Han Siha, had managed to tame her pet so easily. Noticing her, the boy asked if the beast was her pet, and mentioned he'd been observing her efforts for a while. He advised that her approach to taming the beast was wrong. The girl looked confused and deflated. Our boy explained that when a tamer becomes too emotional, it only agitates the beast further. She was surprised and couldn't believe that Han Siha was giving her advice. As she processed his words, she thought about the panel at Adele Academy, the most prestigious school in the empire. This girl, Adele, an earth mage, had never ranked lower than third. Despite her commoner background and the many challenges she faced, few could match her skill. However, it was said that due to the opening exams being conducted by lottery, Adele ended up drawing the subject she was weakest in, Introduction to Basic Taming. She claimed she was simply unlucky, knowing full well her taming skills were lacking. That was why she was there, to practice. But what confused her the most was Han Siha, the boy who couldn't even tame a slime last year, a failure she had witnessed with her own eyes. There were also rumors about him being obsessed with black magic, and she considered him gloomy and inferior, a hopeless case. Yet here he was now, successfully taming her beast, making her usually gentle hellhound almost obsessed with him. Astonished by this turn of events, she asked him how he did it. Han Siha replied that her beast was no longer agitated and that she could take it back now. Grateful for the advice, she picked up her beast and thanked him. Our boy then asked her why she had chosen a hellhound, noting it was quite a challenge for a first-time tamer. She proudly explained that a difficult monster like the hellhound had a high value for her, especially since it was her first attempt in the subject. She wanted to prove herself. Understanding her reasoning, our boy joked that he thought she might prefer a less challenging pet, perhaps one that liked mud baths or something less daunting. Annoyed by his teasing, the girl retorted sharply, pointing out that everyone had seen his earlier failures while she was taming her beast. Anyway, she couldn't help but wonder about Han Siha. He seemed like the kind of person who always acted naturally around others, speaking to her without hesitation, even though she was a commoner and he was a noble. As she observed him, she noticed the creature beside him, a dragon hatchling. What surprised her the most was that Han Siha had already tamed it, a rare feat for someone at their level as a second-year student. It was as if Han Siha had become a completely different person. After that, they went together to a place where the block slimes were, with Adele confirming and double-checking that they were in the right location. It seemed our boy had suggested this spot to her as a place where she could practice and improve her cooperation with her beast, helping them become more familiar with each other. When our boy confirmed that this was the right place, Adele got started. She pushed aside the vines and grass to reveal a group of block slimes hiding in the area. It seemed this was a spawn area. As she inspected it, our boy mentioned that he had almost wiped them out earlier, but they had respawned quickly. Hearing this, she told him not to worry, because she would handle it immediately. Drawing her sword, she confidently remarked that she could finish them off in one hit. Anyway, she ordered him to move aside for a moment as she prepared to fight the slimes. The slimes attacked first as soon as they spotted her, but with a single swing of her sword, Adele annihilated them all, leaving a deep, destructive mark where she had struck. Watching this, our boy was a bit amazed, though he couldn't resist teasing her, saying that her aggressive method seemed like overkill, practically burying the slimes alive. Hearing this, Adele grew angry and glared at him menacingly, but she managed to control her emotions, trying to respond calmly and act as if she was ignoring his comment. Meanwhile, a single slime had survived and was moving to attack her. To her surprise, Han Siha suddenly used magic to attack the slime. She couldn't believe it. She distinctly remembered that he couldn't use proper magic. Shocked, she was lost in thought. Our boy then asked if she hadn't noticed the slime coming back. Still in a state of shock, she fumbled for an excuse, trying to claim she had known all along but hadn't reacted. Before she could finish her sentence, our boy started to leave, calling for his cute Basil to follow, saying they needed to go. He added almost casually that it was a relief if that was the case, as he walked away. Deep down, Adele realized the truth. She hadn't sensed the slime approaching from behind. She also noticed that Han Siha's spell, his arrow of magic, had a level of precision that was far beyond what she would expect from a beginner. Our boy began to speak, but his words were cut off when a sudden error occurred in the dungeon, triggering an emergency alarm that echoed throughout the space. Both of them immediately became alert. Our boy asked her if she knew of any device there that could have caused this, but she had no idea either. As they stood there, trying to figure out what was happening, a man in the principal's office reported to the honorary principal that there was an emergency in the training ground dungeon. Upon hearing this, the principal asked if there had been an error with the spell and inquired about the current situation inside the dungeon and which students were there. The man replied that 2 students were present, one named Han Siha. Hearing this, the principal sighed and remarked that Han Siha was a troublemaker, implying that even if the boy died, it would not be a significant loss. However, he noted that the other student, a girl named Adele, was different. She was promising and talented, and her safety was a different matter entirely. The principal lamented that Han Siha lacked talent or skill, speculating that he would likely die, and had no chance of surviving such an error-ridden dungeon. He explained that if there was a flaw in the dungeon's magical formula, the monsters could grow abnormally large and far stronger than their usual level. He emphasized again that our boy had virtually no chance of survival, and advised the staff to mentally prepare themselves for the potential outcome. Back in the dungeon, Han Siha and Adele seemed fine for the moment, and had managed to defeat several slime monsters. However, it appeared the monsters kept coming, showing no signs of running out. Adele was frustrated, exclaiming that the monsters were becoming even more terrifying, and that the place had turned into hell in an instant. She became increasingly agitated, shouting that there seemed to be no end to it, as the monsters kept respawning over and over. She even swore that she would never look at a slime again, calling it slime salad. While she panicked, our boy found her words somewhat amusing as he watched her. But he also felt a bit worried. He noticed that Adele seemed exhausted from the relentless waves of monsters, yet she still looked surprisingly fine. He commented that although her timing skills were amateurish, her swordsmanship was on par with the professionals. He began to wonder if she could be the Earth Mage, destined to become a great sorcerer, or perhaps more accurately, a great mage swordsman. Still, he couldn't help but think it was odd for someone as fearsome as her to be rolling around in a beginner's practice area like that. When talking about Earth Mages, the term mage swordsman is fairly common. Even though the girl was a bit short-tempered, Han Siha thought it was remarkable that she wasn't openly looking down on him. He admired her personality, finding it quite impressive as he pondered over her character. Meanwhile, Adele noticed that he seemed distracted, not paying attention to the monsters and relaxing while she did all the hard work. She thought Han Siha was a bit of a creep and asked him why he was nodding to himself instead of helping to fight. While our boy Wonder said to her that they had been there for over 3 hours, he questioned why there was no response from outside to help them. It seemed as though no one knew there was a problem, which would explain why there was no response. He said this while looking up. Adele replied that it couldn't be helped since only about 30 minutes had passed outside, because time inside moved slower than it did outside. This, she said, was an advantage for them, as they could train sufficiently. Hearing this, our boy understood why there was no response yet. He added that even if they knew the situation and came to rescue them, they would still have several hours to hold out. They would need to endure and keep fighting the slime monster until the rescuers arrived, which seemed impossible. As she listened to what Han Siha said, her temper boiled again. She demanded to know why he had to say such unlucky words, as if they were just sitting there, waiting to die. Our boy sarcastically responded, as if he would ever do that, and seemed pleased as he said it. As they argued, he smiled and said to her to buy him some time, while she was confused and asked what he was planning. Our boy, who seemed to want to do something, told her she would know when the time came. He then asked her to keep the slime monster from getting too close, because it wouldn't take long to do what he needed to do. Hearing this, she demanded to know why she had to handle it alone, and asked what he was going to do in the meantime. But our boy ignored her and started executing his plan. As Adele watched him walk away with an angry and irritated expression, our boy felt a sense of self-satisfaction, thinking that his initial judgment about her was correct. Meanwhile, their cute companion Basil seemed worried about Adele, but our boy reassured him that he had everything planned out. As he walked, he noticed glowing vines emitting light. He mentioned that he had read about these vines in the story and knew how to deal with them. According to the original novel, the Error Dungeon was intended to highlight the differences in ability between the protagonist, Li Han, and Han Siha. Han Siha had previously tried and spectacularly failed at this part of the dungeon, which involved dealing with these vines. Our boy was pleased to find them and instructed Basil to search the area for more of these unique vines, gather them, and bring them to him. Basil carefully checked the area and, after completing his search, flew off to find more. While Basil was busy, our boy continued to recount the negative treatment of readers towards Han Siha, who had used the method and been cursed as a stupid loser and an evil guy. He commented that he didn't think Han Siha deserved such abuse, all while holding a unique vine in his hand. Meanwhile, Adele seemed to be managing fine alone against the slime, but her mana was running low. She demanded to know why it was taking Han Siha so long and cursed him in frustration. But speaking of the devil, our boy showed up, shouting that it was done. Adele, turning around, was surprised and a little confused, seeing both the boy and the mysterious vines as if he had built a barricade. She signaled him to hurry inside, although Adele was a bit confused and suggested doing things quietly because the slimes were regenerating so quickly. Our boy insisted that she get inside immediately. He then explained his plan, to build a defensive wall and kill the monsters outside of it. By using amplification magic and fire, He could stop the slimes from regenerating and cause them to evaporate. With confidence on his face, he cast a spell, creating a large green arrow with arrow magic. He added that the only thing left was to set the arrows on fire. Turning to Basil, he instructed, "It's your turn now." Basil's eyes glowed again as he began setting the arrows on fire. Our boy then released the flaming arrows outside their barricade, where the slime monsters, seeing the shining projectiles, were surprised. The beautiful and shining arrows, akin to fireworks, unexpectedly ended their lives with a large explosion. Meanwhile, Adele, witnessing Han Siha's creation, was amazed and couldn't believe it. She asked herself if this was really the Han Siha she knew, while as the slime seemed to evaporate and didn't regenerate. Our boy explained to her that when he buried the slimes and scattered their remains across the ground, the slime's poison had the property of exploding when exposed to fire magic. While saying this, she asked if he had also planned to prevent the rain of fire from reaching inside their barricade. Our boy responded that it was a good observation, but explained that their barricade vines were not ordinary. They were fire-resistant and immune to flames. Now that everything around them was burning, they just needed to wait for their rescue to arrive. As the situation seemed to be under control, our boy felt relieved. Adele looked at him and thought about how unlikely it was that she would be saved by him. She mused that nobles at Ardell Academy usually couldn't care less about commoners' lives. So she wondered if our boy had some ulterior motive. Noticing her deep thoughts, our boy asked what she was thinking about and why she was looking at him that way. He assumed she would thank him for saving her life. Despite her grumpy demeanor, Adele was kind-hearted and told him that she was indeed grateful, if only a little, because she owed him her life. Hearing this, our boy remarked that it was good and then asked if she could do him a favor. Adele, appearing worried and hesitant, wondered what the favor might be. He noted that if it was something she could easily do, she would not hesitate, but if it was a creepy request, she might decline. Before she could finish her words, our boy said to her that she needed to keep secret what had happened there, what he had seen and everything she had witnessed. He requested that she keep all of it confidential, including taming the beast, capturing the error slime in one go, and building the barricade with the vines. Adele realized that her guess was correct, but she still felt that something was off. She wondered if Han Siha was hiding something, thinking of him as a bastard with a secret, while observing him pick up some slime orbs. After that, the dungeon cleanup was handled vaguely. The two professors, who were earlier confused about the sudden dungeon errors, decided to reward the students who had closed the dungeon without major injuries. Following this event, our boy was called to the dean's office to receive a generous reward. As he sat comfortably in the dean's office, he appeared relieved. He mentioned that he understood the value of rewards and how they might be used, but he seemed uninterested. His priority was to make his cute beast and himself stronger. With the dean absent, he and Basil were alone. He called Basil over, who happily went to him with a bright smile on his face. As Basil approached, our boy checked his status. It showed that Basilisk Atrasis was a red dragon who was always cheerful and very serious about cheese and quite friendly towards him. It seemed that Basil's flamethrower ability had increased significantly, and his toxicity resistance was a new skill he had acquired during their encounter with the dungeon error. Our boy remarked that he was unsure about what the Dark Magician organization was up to, but he knew that Basil had come from the basement, implying that the Dark Magician organization had some connection to that place. Nonetheless, he stated that his cute Basil was not only a valuable dragon, but also a hatchling with outstanding talent and potential. He also praised Basil for his amazing growth rate, precise control of breath, and immense magic power, which left him even more amazed by how truly overwhelming Basil was in every aspect. He made sure to raise him properly, even sweating over the effort. Now, he told Basil that he had really gone through a lot to obtain the slime orbs. Showing one to Basil, he explained that it was an overpowered item and asked if it looked delicious to him, suggesting with a smile that he should try eating it. Basil, however, seemed disgusted and hesitant, as if he believed it was poisonous. Despite Basil's reluctance, he convinced him to try it, assuring him that it was delicious and that eating one or two wouldn't be fatal. After some hesitation, Basil eventually tried it, but to his surprise, he found the taste so unpleasant that he vomited. Our boy, observing this, thought that the taste must have been absolutely terrible, as he hadn't tried it himself and didn't know what it tasted like. Still, he smiled and noted that despite the terrible taste, the stats of his beast seemed to have changed. It appeared that the magic power and toxicity resistance had increased after eating the orb. The slime orb item amplifies the stats of the consumer, with just one increasing even basic mana stats, which usually takes a long time to improve. He mentioned that Basil had probably noticed a subtle change, but to his surprise, Basil became addicted to the orbs and consumed them all as if there were no tomorrow. As Basil ate them, his stats rapidly increased. Our boy was pleased, sitting and hearing the notification sounds, which felt like a reward. At that moment, someone knocked on his door. He wondered who it might be, only to find that it was Adele, who burst in and called him with an intense tone. However, she was only joking and soon became her usual kind self. She said she had been searching for him everywhere and had finally found him in the dean's office. Our boy wondered if Adele had been called there to receive items as well. Adele then demanded to know if he truly didn't care about giving her all the credit for dealing with the error slime monster. She implied that this would make her more well-known and result in her receiving more items than him. She asked if he was okay with that, while he responded while scratching his head, saying that he really didn't care about it, so she could lower her voice because his ears were hurting from her loudness. He mentioned that life was more important than such items and added that if rumors spread about him clearing the dungeon, it could cause trouble. Fame could attract the Dark Organization, which might lead to his demise if they found out he was living well and freely. He also said he didn't want to be famous like the protagonist. Adele, showing sympathy, said if that was the case, he should keep it to himself because she didn't want fame either. This created a dramatic atmosphere, and our boy wondered why she was so sympathetic. He told her abruptly that he didn't need sympathy from someone he didn't know, and asked her not to mention it. Adele, stunned for a moment, approached him angrily and demanded to know how he didn't know her, questioning why he didn't. Our boy, seemingly irritated, covered his ears because her talking was like a machine gun. He sarcastically asked if he needed to know her and inquired about her name. He wanted to confirm if she was the person he had read about in the novel. When Adele said her name was Adele Stivia, our boy's jaw dropped in shock. He responded that he now knew her name and confirmed that she was indeed the great magician from a commoner's background who had consistently been in the top 3 at the academy. The main character who cruelly buried him alive in the story was now introducing herself to him and asking if he knew who she was. Our boy thought to himself that the person in front of him was the one who would end his life in the future. Panicking, he felt he was unlucky to encounter her, as if some higher power had given him a grim fate. Overthinking, he worried that his head might explode from the stress, muttering to himself that he was going crazy from this misfortune. Adele, seeing him in a state of paranoia, asked if he looked at himself in the mirror every day. She then pulled him over to a mirror to see himself. She remarked that she couldn't imagine that someone like him would come to the dean's office to receive an item. Seeing his reflection for the first time since being reincarnated in Han Siha's body, our boy was shocked by his filthy and shabby appearance. He commented on how it was possible that he did not appear as the handsome man he had imagined, realizing that people avoided him not out of fear, but out of disgust. Despite this, he remained confident and resolved to make some changes, starting with fixing his hair, before improving his overall appearance. The next day in their classroom, our boy made a grand and unexpected entrance. As he walked in, his classmates discussed him, wondering if he was new. They speculated that the handsome man must be a new transfer student, though he seemed familiar to them. Some of his other classmates recognized him, noting that he was indeed Han Siha, not a new student, due to his suddenly changed appearance. Others remarked that Han Siha seemed like a completely different person. As our boy sat there, all his classmates chattered about him. He joked that he must be handsome enough for everyone to be talking about him. Suddenly, one of his classmates asked if he had received some kind of polymorph treatment, expressing a desire to become as good-looking as him and asking to share the secret. Our boy thought about this young man with red hair named Creek, who came from a commoner's background and was trying to boss him around. Since he was not the real Han Siha, he was not so easily bullied. As Creek continued to mock him, calling him a pathetic loser, while our boy ignored him, the situation escalated. The guy insinuated that cutting his hair had made him lose his mind. Our boy, who harbored a strong dislike for people with talkative mouths, decided he couldn't tolerate this behavior any longer. Calmly, he warned the guy that if he didn't stop talking, he would have no choice but to silence him. The guy, undeterred, retorted that he was big enough to speak up, having been abandoned by his own family. Our boy shot back, advising him not to talk big. Meanwhile, our cute Basil emerged from his bag, exuding a domineering aura and an icy chill. The intense vibes between them left the guy trembling and nervous. Classmates were shocked, commenting that an ordinary student couldn't possess such a beastly presence. Despite the pressure, the guy remained tough and determined not to back down. As he continued mocking our boy, he didn't even think twice about what he was saying, looking down on our cute Basil. Meanwhile, our boy was thinking that he had planned to live cautiously and quietly, but he told himself he never agreed to endure such humiliation in silence. With this thought, he responded, saying it was a pity for someone as foolish as the boy to pick the wrong opponent. And as he addressed him as folks commoner, our boy could see his anger boiling over. The boy, barking insults like a dog, grew more enraged with each word. Yet, our boy found amusement in watching the boy lose his composure, taunting him as if he were taming a wild beast. He commented on how easily the boy was provoked, losing his cool over just a few words. Our boy's sharp tongue and sarcastic tone had shifted the power dynamic. Now, he was the one bullying the bully. With a bright smile, he patted Basil's head and said, "Even a dragon hatchling can make an impact, as you've seen. It's not about size. It's about capability." He then looked at the boy, teasingly asking if he was afraid it might actually bite. The boy, an ordinary student, was clearly unsettled. Our boy further taunted him, warning that if he ended up dead, there would be no way to bring him back. The boy, unable to contain his anger, shouted in frustration, demanding to know if he was serious, insisting our boy needed to learn his limits. Sensing the boy's growing agitation, our boy added fuel to the fire, challenging him to wait for the results of the opening exam. "Then we'll see who comes out on top," he declared. The boy was stunned, clearly not expecting such a sudden challenge. After this bold declaration, the scene shifted to the end of class, with our boy walking back to his dorm. As he reflected on the day's events, our boy recalled how Creek had told him that if he could beat him, Creek would bark like a dog. Our boy had responded by thanking him for the easy negotiation. Their bet was settled. Now, he thought, all he had to do was wait and see Creek bark. This brought back memories of his previous life, where he was known for being good at cleaning up his messes. That's why others called him a scumbag intern. He always stood up against injustice and never lost to anyone. Proud of himself, he was suddenly interrupted by his classmates. They asked if he was really going to kick Creek's ass this time, adding that he'd be lucky to just pass. They mocked him, asking how he dared to challenge Creek in the exam, as if he was fooling himself. They couldn't wait to see him bark like a dog. Our boy remained calm, ignoring their taunts, thinking that this was the same in any world. People like them wouldn't leave others alone, even if they were doing well. So, what do you think he should do in this situation? Leave them be or make a move? Comment with your opinion in the comment section. Meanwhile, as the others sought attention and seemed to be attention seekers, our boy turned to a yellow-haired guy and asked for his name. The guy sensed something bad was about to happen and nervously asked why our boy cared. But our boy cut him off, demanding his name. The boy had no choice but to reveal it. Fabian den Edwin. He seemed to shake and panic as he said it. asking if our boy didn't already know. Hearing this, our boy wondered if he had read about him or knew him from a story. Then he remembered. Fabian den Edwin was the arrogant prince who used his position to manipulate weaker people, a leader of malicious bullies who targeted him. Without further ado, he played his hidden card, opening his bag to reveal our cute Basil. At that moment, Basil looked confused, having no idea what his master was planning to do with him. When the guy saw it, he was shocked and hadn't expected our boy to use it against him. He asked what our boy planned to do by showing it to him. Our cute little Basil stared at him with a gleaming look, and suddenly it jumped toward him. Edwin and his friends were caught off guard. Seeing Basil seemingly attack Edwin, his friends quickly fled, leaving him behind as he shouted for help. After that, the scene shifted. Our boy seemed to have finished his practice and was sitting down when Adele approached him. She asked if he had heard the new rumors spreading around, noting that this time the rumors were no joke. She advised him that, for his own well-being, it would be best not to mess with royalty, referring to the boy named Edwin, whom he had recently bullied. Hearing this, our boy responded that he didn't care about it, because those bastards were the ones who started it. He was simply teaching them some manners. Originally, she had thought he was just a noble thug who took out his anger on commoners like her. But now she believed he was not just any noble, perhaps even an imperial prince, who resorted to biting anyone he disliked. However, as she thought about it, she found our boy a bit more tolerable than she had first imagined. With a happy expression, she told him he was surely hopeless. As she said this, she approached him, asking if all nobles like him were completely lacking in common sense. She remarked that not only did he have his dragon bite some bullies, but he also made a random bet with Creek. She added that trying to beat Creek in a test seemed reckless from her perspective. She extended her hand to him as she spoke, and our boy looked at her with a confused expression. She continued, saying that if she hadn't helped him, who knows what might have happened. Our boy responded that she was also learning from him about her poor timing in controlling his beast, and in exchange, he was teaching her how to evaluate her magic. She told him to forget it and suggested they start their practice training. She made a deal. If he could defeat her, it would mean he had a chance to beat Creek too. With an excited expression, he assured her that he would defeat Creek. The two of them began their match, and Adele was the first to attack, casting a spell at him. Our boy went on the defensive, casting a barrier around his body as a shield. As Adele unleashed her attack magic, a large explosion occurred. Because of their special training session, time passed quickly, and soon, the day of the entrance exam they had both been awaiting finally arrived. Adele had just finished her evaluation, and the professor was analyzing her results, with only her final score left to be announced. The professor then revealed that she had completed her magic exam in just 5 minutes and 31 seconds, and awarded her an A grade. Adele beamed with happiness and thanked her professor. Meanwhile, our boy watched her celebrate her success. He thought to himself that, although he had his past life's experience and memories, it was clear that when it came to talent, Adele was truly promising. Her first attempt at timing a beast was remarkable. She was indeed a prodigy, a leading character in her own right. As he pondered this, the professor announced that our boy would be the next to take the exam. He acknowledged this and stepped into the magic cube, where the beast-taming portion of the exam would take place. Inside, he learned that a virtual monster, matched to the level of his own tamed creature, would be his opponent, and the objective was simple: win the fight. He chose Cube C and signaled his readiness. Suddenly, a massive serpent emerged, filling the space with a chilling atmosphere and a domineering aura. The beast was identified as an Adaptrion, a serpent-like monster he had first encountered in his 3rd year. Its imposing presence and massive size suggested that a single collision could be lethal, just as the novel had described. As he considered this, he reassured Basil not to be afraid, noting that Basil likely wanted to face this challenge as much as he did. While Basil appeared nervous, our boy reminded him that he had greatly improved and become much stronger since consuming so many slime orbs. He encouraged Basil to focus on having fun. Hearing this, Basil seemed to gain confidence. The battle began. Our boy instructed Basil to get close to the serpent, knowing that the creature typically had poor vision. He used himself as bait to distract it, while simultaneously preparing to cast a spell. He warned Basil to stay alert, as an all-out attack from the serpent could end them both. As he drew the serpent's attention with his magic, Basil maneuvered to its blind spot. Then, Basil unleashed his signature attack, a burst of flamethrower directly at the serpent's eyes, which resulted in the beast's immediate demise. The massive serpent crashed to the ground, causing the cube room to shake. Watching from the side, the professor grinned, though he and the others were clearly shocked by the outcome. The professor in particular seemed surprised, wondering how it was possible that the Adaptrion, an advanced monster that would challenge even a third-class mage, was defeated in a single strike by Han Siha's young dragon hatchling. As the professor pondered this, our boy exited the cube room, stepping into a crowd buzzing with excitement. Voices murmured about how effortlessly he had defeated the monster, their eyes following him with a mix of awe and curiosity. Our boy thought the orb slime's effect was working perfectly, as he happily observed the outcome. He looked at his professor and asked if he had passed the examination. Somewhat humbly, he admitted that it took some time, but he managed to do it. The professor, with an expression of surprise, announced the result. Han Siha completed the test in 12 minutes and 36 seconds, earning an S grade. This left our boy in shock. He hadn't expected this. The result could attract unwanted attention, potentially ruining all his plans. As the examination ended, our boy and Adele walked together. Adele, smiling, told him she was impressed he received an S grade and was sure he would rank first in their section. As Adele praised him, our boy was also unexpectedly pleased. Their sparring sessions had clearly paid off, resulting in good grades. But a new problem weighed on his mind. He only wanted to be ranked around 15th to maintain a mediocre profile and avoid drawing attention. Now, with such a high grade, he feared all his plans would go to waste. Lost in thought and slightly panicking, he muttered to himself. Noticing his gloomy expression, Adele teased him, saying it was unbelievable how often he worried to himself, warning jokingly that Han Siha might become a psychopath if he continued like this. She then changed the subject, asking him how he found the arithmetic test. He remembered the test and how their rankings were based on the average score across all subjects. He mentioned that it was okay and that the questions were easy, but he had only answered one correctly on purpose. He told her it was just so-so. Adele admitted she had messed up too, sighing in frustration. She complained that if the exams hadn't been so difficult, she could have gotten better results. Hearing her complaints, our boy remembered that Adele was weak in math. He couldn't help but tease her a bit, flaunting his own skills. Adele, noticing his smug attitude, quickly changed the topic, coughing and remarking how they had been given problems that hadn't even been covered in class yet, which explained why they couldn't solve some of them. Her words made him pause. He asked her if missing one question would really be a problem. As he started to rush off, Adele asked what he was talking about. She then warned him that if he missed the top spot due to one wrong answer, he wouldn't get the scholarship. She added, almost as an afterthought, asking if he had solved question number 27, the one about the magic circle. He responded that he thought he had solved it. Adele seemed taken aback by his answer, looking shocked. Noticing her sudden reaction, he asked if he had said something wrong. She replied that perhaps she was wrong, asking him again if he was certain he had solved question 27, the one she and their classmates couldn't solve. Hearing this, he was stunned and shocked. He hadn't expected this. He wondered why it was so difficult for them, since he thought it was the easiest question on the entire test. Panic set in again as he muttered to himself, "What am I going to do now?" If he actually got it right, it would surely attract attention, and his name would spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, in Professor DeBert's office, Professor Selene was reporting the overall results of the students' scores. She mentioned that only one student had correctly answered question 27. Professor DeBert, hearing this, remarked that he had designed the question to be unsolvable, not expecting any student to crack it. He asked who the student was that managed to solve this supposedly impossible problem. Selin replied that it was their student, Han Siha. Upon examining his test paper, it turned out that, besides question 27, all his other answers were intentionally wrong. She speculated that Han Siha had solved the hardest problem correctly, just to show off his skills. But the truth was, our boy didn't solve it intentionally. It was a major mistake on his part. Regardless, hearing this, the old professor recalled Han Siha as the student who also stood out in the recent Taming exam. He thought to himself that Han Siha seemed like someone who carefully considered his future, a sentiment he had correctly expressed to him before. The only problem was that Han Siha wanted to live quietly, but it seemed fate had other plans for him. Who knew what would happen next? The following day, the rankings for the second-year examinations were posted on the bulletin board. A crowd gathered to check their results, including our boy, who was specifically looking for Creek's ranking. When he saw that Creek was ranked 32nd, he commented that it was the same as usual. Curious about his own ranking, he looked for his name. The atmosphere shifted as everyone started whispering in disbelief. The ranking list seemed to have caused a stir. Our boy was stunned to see he was ranked 11th. Creek, now panicking, seemed ready to flee after seeing the unexpected results. To his surprise, our boy called out to him, telling him to follow. As Creek followed Han Siha outside, many of their classmates and other students watched, whispering among themselves. They couldn't believe Han Siha had climbed to 11th place in the rankings and praised his achievement. Some jeered, predicting Creek's downfall and mocking him for his past arrogance. Creek, feeling ashamed, couldn't even look Han Siha in the eye. "So, Creek," Han Siha began, "what's 1 plus 10? Creek, flustered and embarrassed, stammered, It's 2, unable to think straight. Han Siha shook his head, chuckling. "Wrong answer," he said with a smirk. "It's 11, just like his rank." Creek's face flushed with embarrassment. Han Siha continued, addressing him mockingly as 32nd place boy, clearly enjoying the moment. Creek grew increasingly furious, clenching his fists in anger. Han Siha thought to himself that Creek hadn't improved at all and was still easily falling for taunts. Although he didn't particularly enjoy humiliating someone or making them bark like a dog, he decided to let it go and flicked Creek on the forehead. Creek was shocked. "What is he doing, hitting him like that? That wasn't part of their deal," he shouted, clearly angry. Han Siha calmly replied that it was just a little payback for all the trouble Creek had caused, for bullying people. Creek tried to protest, saying that if he thought that, but before he could finish, Han Siha cut him off. Walking away, Han Siha instructed Creek to meet later in the unused clubroom in the basement, where they could have some privacy. Creek, still bewildered, asked why he'd been brought there. Han Siha explained there was something for Creek to do and suggested he consider it carefully. Han Siha didn't want to make Creek act like a dog in front of the entire school, but if Creek didn't want to cooperate, he might want to reconsider his options. Creek, furious, demanded to know what Han Siha was planning. Before Creek could react, Han Siha asked if he knew his father. Creek, bewildered, replied that he certainly knew of Han Su, the founder of the Adele Empire, the Blood Count, who had annihilated the Dark Magicians in the Dark Magic War. Creek wondered why Han Siha would ask such a question, suspecting that he was trying to intimidate him with his noble status. Creek was curious if Han Siha was plotting something. Our boy asked this because he genuinely didn't know about it, because we know was that he is not the real Han Siha. He mentioned that the important point was that Han Su had a wide network spreading rumors. Saying this to him as our boy approached and pointed his finger at Creek, Creek asked what he meant by that. Han Siha suddenly whispered something, making Creek drop his jaw in shock. Creek asked if Han Siha was sure about telling all the students. Han Siha confirmed he was sure and ordered him to do it as quickly as possible, saying that the more widespread, the better. Han Siha said goodbye, as he had more to do. Creek, left behind, was shocked and couldn't believe it, calling Han Siha a fucking insane bastard. The scene shifted to Han Su's office, where he was busy with work. A butler knocked on the door and asked for permission to enter, bringing news about Han Siha. Han Su, upon hearing the report, expressed disdain for his son, labeling him as pathetic and a bastard. He allowed the butler to report, but showed little interest, continuing with his tasks. The butler relayed that, despite Han Tae-soo generously covering Han Siha's tuition and boarding fees, he had halted all other support, leaving Han Siha to struggle financially and endure hunger. Han Tae-soo dismissed the concern, stating that his son would not die from such hardship. He added that Han Siha needed to experience some difficulty to regain his senses. Abruptly, Han Tae-soo's demeanor grew serious, as he warned that if anyone uttered blasphemous words about dark magic in his presence again, he would not hesitate to end the discussion and even kill them on the spot, regardless of their relation and even his own son. The butler appeared anxious and sweating as he reported that he believed his son had finally changed his attitude. He was about to deliver news about his son achieving an unprecedented score in the promotion exam. Despite the impressive news, he thought it might not be enough to sway his father's opinion. However, when the butler revealed that his son had ranked 11th, so he was stunned and visibly surprised hearing that. The butler also mentioned that there had been recent changes in his son's reputation. According to the latest rumors, that their young master was now described as compassionate, upright, and remarkably handsome. This revelation caused him to wonder about the sudden shift in his son's behavior. He questioned the butler, suspecting that his son might be blackmailing someone to spread such favorable rumors. The butler reassured him that the rumors were true. Still, he, though skeptical, was inclined to believe it. But he suddenly recalled the days when his son dabbled in black magic and criticized his harsh methods for correcting his son's behavior. If his son was indeed changing, then but before finishing his word, he suddenly stood up with a joyful expression and declared that if his son entered the magic department in the upcoming promotion ceremony, he would reinstate all financial support. Meanwhile, the scene then shifted to an ATM stone magic machine, where our boy could hardly believe his eyes as he saw his exam results. He discovered that a portion of his previously cut allowance had been restored. Astonished by the substantial amount, he realized he could comfortably live for an entire semester. Grateful for his father's honor and touched by the unexpectedly positive outcome of the rumors he spread around their school, so he praised himself, acknowledging his brilliant plan. He considered himself a genius, admiring his own ingenuity. While Adele was calling him, she asked what he was doing and why he was talking to himself like a psychopath. She reminded him that it was time to move to the auditorium for their promotion ceremony. He replied that he understood, and the two of them headed there together. As they walked down the hallway, the boy recalled details from the original novel. At Adele Academy, second-year students are assigned to departments based on their aptitudes. The magic department handles a broad range of magical skills and offers many practical opportunities. The natural science department combines magic with research, experimentation, and academic elements. The theology department focuses on magic combined with spiritual abilities like prophecy and divination. Lastly, the necromancy department specializes in black magic and combat magic. The dean, Ernest, announced that the promotion ceremony was about to begin and welcomed the students as second-year students. He instructed the students who were called up to come to the stage and place their hands on the magic dice. The magic dice, he explained, detects one's innate disposition and determines their assigned major. In the original novel, Han Siha was naturally assigned to the necromancy department because of his desire to use black magic to avenge those who had looked down on him. However, this desire led to a miserable defeat. Now, he wondered if the magic dice would give him the same result. Though his disposition had been adjusted, he knew that his recent actions could not be entirely classified as righteous. Still, he hoped he wouldn't end up like his novel counterpart. The dean called the name Lee Han, a top student aiming for the magic department. As Lee Han walked to the stage, their classmates praised him, noting how cool he was. Our boy thought to himself that Lee Han was the protagonist of Seoul Academy and commented on how unreal his appearance seemed, suspecting some sort of buff. He wished he could be a protagonist too, imagining himself as a handsome man. Lee Han placed his hand on the magic dice, which began to glow. The dean announced that Lee Han had been assigned to the magic department. While as our boy watched, He had expected the guy to be assigned to that department. He also mentioned that Lee Han seemed to anticipate this as well. The dean then called out the next student, Solia Arcanet. As Solia walked up, our boy introduced her as the Mage of Light, a genius among geniuses and one of the protagonist's allies. The dean announced that Solia had been assigned to the magic department, which our boy had predicted. The remaining assignments continued according to ranking. The promising top student Seymour Parker was assigned to necromancy, and Yoon Hale was assigned to the theology department. Our boy observed the process, noting that seeing familiar names and characters close by was quite spectacular. When his name was called, he walked up with a mix of anticipation and anxiety, reflecting on the possibility of 3 years from now, where the necromancy department might lead a rebellion against the academy, only to be defeated by the protagonist group. As he placed his hand on the magic dice device, hoping not to be assigned to necromancy, his classmates were talking about him, speculating about his recent changes and rumors of his involvement in black magic. As the device glowed and then turned red, the dean looked shocked and announced that Han Siha was assigned to the magic department. Our boy felt relieved and thankful that he wasn't assigned to necromancy, and his classmates were surprised and unable to believe it. Stepping off the stage, he felt annoyed by their gazes, sensing a mix of curiosity and suspicion from those who had dabbled in black magic. Adele, looking pleased, congratulated him, saying they would likely see each other in the magic department. Our boy had expected Adele would be assigned there too. When he asked if she hoped he'd be in the magic department, Adele confirmed it with a kind and cute expression that made him blush. He tried to hide his face with his hand, feeling embarrassed. Noticing his reaction, Adele asked if something was wrong. He reassured her that there was no problem and asked her to use a signal next time she approached him. Adele was puzzled by this request, but their conversation was interrupted when Lee Han approached them. Lee Han greeted our boy and expressed his intention to make friends since they would be in the same department. Our boy felt uneasy about Lee Han's friendliness and wondered about his motives. So, this is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Don't forget to leave your comments below. Your opinions are valuable. Goodbye, and see you in the next chapter.